Hello and welcome to Surprise We Both Love Movies. This week we're going to be reviewing the latest movie from HBO Max called Judas and the Black Messiah, starring Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield. Now this movie takes place in the late 60s and it's a kind of a duality to this story. You're first introduced to one of the characters, his name is William O'Neill, and this is all based off of true events, who's a car thief who becomes a informant for the FBI and looking into what's going on with the Black Panthers at this time. And then at the same time, you're introduced to Daniel Kaluuya's character, who plays Fred Hampton, the leader of the Black Panthers in Chicago. Now, as these two very conflicting but interesting storylines converge, you realize that the FBI is basically trying to figure out what's going on with the Black Panthers because they want them decimated at basically all costs. And you learn that, a lot about Fred Hampton and what the Black Panthers are. There's often a big misconception as to what the Black Panthers are. And a lot of that has to do with how the government was trying to squash the Black Panthers. And so there was lots of deception and lots of misinformation and lots of infiltrating conflict that was led by our government, unfortunately, to try to undermine the movement. And it was a movement of, not only the Black Panthers, but several other groups in Chicago that were from the ground up. There was like the White Southerners that had a group in Chicago, and there's a couple other groups that had been part of Martin Luther King's movement, and they all tried to combine and became called the Rainbow Coalition. And the government didn't see this as a good thing, and especially J. Edgar Hoover, who was obviously in charge of the FBI at that time. And he did almost everything he could in order to make sure this group and groups like this did not become one of the big voices in the political sphere. Aaron, you saw this movie as well. What did you think, man?
Yeah, well, you and I had a discussion prior to us seeing the film, and you were giving me a little bit of backstory on the Black Panthers, and because I know nothing about the Black Panthers, and we talked about that. And it's not just them; it's like the Hell's Angels. I've never looked into these groups. I don't know what they were all about. So, to me, they're just a mystery. And after our conversation, I was hoping that this movie was going to dig a little deeper into who they were, and I think they barely scratched the surface in this movie. And this is what I found disappointing about the film. I wanted something much deeper than what they gave. This was a very much on the surface, straight to the point film. I thought the first 45 minutes was rather slow until they got into it. And I didn't think they built enough around the character for you to really feel something for him. He was in certain situations, but you didn't emotionally get connected with him. And I think that was a big negative in the film, because the event that happens, it's a big event. I mean, I'm not going to spoil the story if you don't know it, but it gets nasty towards the end of the film, and it gets pretty twisted because of what the FBI did. For me, I enjoyed the film, but you know what I found most interesting?
Looking up what happened actually afterwards.
Right. It's when they made you read 3 pages of stuff that happened afterwards, and I'm like, that's the movie I want to see. What they just gave me was the boring part. I want to see what they talked about. And so I felt disappointed in that. I would have liked this to have gone on further because of the way they conveyed the first 45 minutes. They really could have condensed this down and put more of what actually happened. And I felt like they missed on this one. I thought it could have been very impactful, but instead they gave us a basic story that helps you understand what happened.
Right.
But that's it. It doesn't, you don't feel emotionally connected to it. And I don't know if
I would say that you did feel emotionally connected to the William O'Neill character.
Yes.
Which is obviously, more of the, you're conflicted on whether or not, how much to, that he's, how much he's willing to buy into the Black Panthers, because he is conflicted in that he wants the Black Panther movement to be successful, but at the same time, he's looking for this, reason to go ahead and profit for himself and do what's best in his best interest. And you see that, and that's what this movie is. It's less of a biopic about Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party movement, but more about man versus man and man versus himself is what I felt.
It was more about the CI than it was the Black Panthers. Watching the trailer, you would think that the other guy was going to be the main focus.
Right. Right.
But it wasn't. It was the other way around. It was very much more of his story. And even what they talk about after, it's more of his story, which was the more compelling part of this. And so I felt like what they were building up to was kind of in the background and didn't hit the mark the way it should have. And I was disappointed with the film in that regard because I really wanted something to dig into. And I watched it again first thing Friday morning because of HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie, I'm like, come on. Like, it could have been a lot more compelling, especially in the first 45 minutes. And I think they failed in getting the message across. And the only thing I took away really from this film, because they didn't show enough with the Black Panthers, was that the FBI did some pretty nefarious things.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the only thing I really took away from it. I didn't garner anything else. And I was like, you should have garnered a lot more. This was a good opportunity to really tell a compelling story. And I think they missed the mark.
Well, I would have to disagree with you on that because, I mean, you really look at Fred Hampton and his life, and it was, besides, I mean, he was like, he was involved with the NAACP. He was, part of the Martin Luther King's movement. And then he went and he started, he went to college and then he went and became part of they
don't show that
offset of the Black Panthers. So it really wasn't, I don't know if it was that compelling, like the really compelling part is how this story ends. If you want to be really honest, as far as dramatic purposes and as far as having a, interesting perspective and an interesting meat and potatoes, like story with 3 acts, really the interesting part is William O'Neill's character. And the fact that, in that time, while the FBI was undermining a lot of these movements, you had someone who should have been helping promote these movements totally compromised. And he was totally, had to own all the mistakes and all the errors and allowed himself to be manipulated because he wanted to improve his, he wanted to take care of himself and he wanted to make sure that he didn't get into trouble. And so you see like how sometimes people in power manipulate people to such extents. And also the FBI, the main character who was the main guy who was the FBI agent, you saw that he was a really good guy. It helped out. If you ever saw Mississippi Burning, he was technically, his character was one of the people that worked with Gene Hackman's character to help get justice for what happened there. And so then you see how he becomes compromised. And I thought that was really interesting because he was really a good guy. He traded this William O'Neill character with, respect and, he understood what he was supposed to do. But when he came back with results and findings that didn't support what Hoover wanted, then they pressured him to do things that he probably knew he shouldn't have did. And then that caused William O'Neill's character to be pressured to do things that he didn't do. And then it kind of showed you the history of Chicago and why, when it did try to help itself, it did try to make itself better. At the same time that they're trying to rise up and make things better, you have the government completely undermining that fact. And that's, I think, the most overriding message of the movie is that, man, like, geez, let them help, let these people help the people of Chicago. And our government did the exact opposite.
I don't think that, I didn't take that though. I don't think, and that's where I think they missed the mark. They didn't do enough with Fred Hampton to make it compelling enough. This was, like I said, more about the CI and his struggle. And the first 45 minutes they could have pushed it along a lot faster or shown the history with Fred Hampton, but they didn't. They barely even scratched the surface in the film. And so with the few protests and the things that they do, you don't feel enough. In fact, they don't agree with you. I don't think they set it up well enough for you to really understand what was happening. And so again, I think their message was to show how bad the FBI was. And you're right. I mean, these guys get twisted up, both the FBI agent that's helping him, and the guy wasn't necessarily doing it for money. He originally gets into it because they've got something on him. Right. So it wasn't about him profiting. It was about him not going to jail. Right. And then they both get manipulated. Both the agent and the CI get manipulated to a very disgusting level. Yeah. And it like I said, the stuff you read afterwards, I was like, that's the movie I want to see. And
well, right. But like you said, he was manipulated before. He was manipulated to kind of save his own butt. But then it became, I'm going to take, how is the government going to take care of me? And I mean, you saw at the end of the movie how much money he made. I won't ruin it for you guys. How much money he made in the 1970s when minimum wage was like $1.75. He was rolling in the dough.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money now. And it was even a flabbergastingly large amount of money then. So
yes, it was.
It was pretty interesting story. What did you think overall, Aaron?
So here's my score on this as a movie.
All right.
I give it a 7. It just, I want it to be a lot more compelling than it was. It wasn't compelling enough. It was interesting, but not compelling. So I'd give it a 7. I can't give it more than that. I wish I could. I wanted to, but I couldn't. As a film, I don't think you can garner anything more than what they gave you on the first viewing, because it is so intimate. They show you what happened, and then they tell you what happened. So there's nothing left to the imagination, where I think they could have made it more compelling. And so with that, I'd have to give it a 6 as a film. I wanted more, but there wasn't enough to chew on. I wish there would have been. Well, what was your score on this?
Well, to your point, I felt the same way as far as a movie score is concerned. Yeah. I'm right in line with you. Like you said, you had a certain feeling about the movement and what he was trying to accomplish, but really the protagonist of the movie was the William O'Neill character, who was very conflicted and had lots of different motivations for the actions that he did. So I give it a 7 as well. We both agree on that. As a film, though, I mean, after I got done watching this movie, it inspired me to find out more about the Black Panthers and about Fred Hampton and about this William O'Neill person, who are all real, very real people, and find out what exactly happened and what, how, much had the FBI, done to just tear this positive movement and turn it into something else. And so that in itself, and finding out, wow, like at the end of the movie, you find out what happens to Fred Hampton, and it's really just disgusting, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so I was able to give it an 8 as a film score because of the conflicted protagonist, because of the themes, and because of the times of what's gone on in the 60s, and also tied into some other movies we'd watched, like the Chicago 7. It was interesting to see how had meshed together, and to come up with it, to also kind of further our knowledge of what was going on during those times. So for me, I was able to give it a 7 as a movie, and an 8 because it sparked interest and inspired me to find out more information about what happened at that time.
Very nice. So that's what we have for you guys today. We appreciate everybody who's watching. Please hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you're listening to us, again, we're on all the major streaming platforms. You can find us under Surprise We Both Love Movies. We appreciate all the support we've had so far. I'm Aaron Fisher.
And I'm Lamont Lovejoy.
See you guys next week.